The IMF is like a big corrupt type World Bank that essentially, and it kind of stems out of what David Rockefeller started. I mean, from what I know,
the IMF was first started. It actually was pretty benevolent.
Well,
but over time it's gotten corrupted.
Well, what I mean is that David Rockefeller in his book talks about, I think it was Chase he worked for.
Right.
That
he owned.
But he was the one who started going into all of these countries and saying, "Hey, let's." He was like head of international finance or something like that, where he's the one who came up with, so he says, the idea is to go into all these other countries and start lending them money. And while lending them money, you build relationships, get certain controls. You know, you're meeting with the heads of these countries. So he built up a nice little thing. And that seems like the same model, essentially, as the IMF.
Exactly what you're saying. There was, in Soviet Russia, there was only one U.S. bank that was functioning in Soviet Russia, Chase Manhattan. And after the fall of the Soviet Union, the breakup of the Soviet Union plus all the oil and natural resources and whatever, it went through Rockefeller. David Rockefeller had a mansion there in Moscow, and he pretty much was like the caretaker and the like the lawyer who's in charge of your will when you die. He was the caretaker of the breakup of the Soviet Union. He got the oligarchs to take control over the oil deposits and reserves and funneled that stuff into the West. When Putin took over, he kicked Rockefeller out of Russia. And that's one of the reasons why the U.S. is so bent on taking care of Putin.
You know, and what's funny is, too, I mean, this guy is in his early 90s. As far as I know, he's in almost perfect health.
Nope, he's not in perfect health. He just got his 6th heart transplant.
Oh, really?
6th.
Well, he's able to maintain his health.
Yeah, he's trying to stay alive long enough until they can actually start putting your soul, your mind into a computer.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is he's still alive, and if he was anybody else, especially bringing up what you just did, he probably would have been dead, years ago.
Pretty much. So anyway, the thing with the IMF in China is the IMF in August of this year went over to China because China is the second largest overall economy, but it's the number one producing economy in the world. So why wouldn't the number one economy in the world have their currency as part of the SDR basket? They went over there, spent 3 days, and they said, you know what, they're just not ready. We're going to readdress this a year from now. Now, this was August.
So,
this last weekend, Christine Lagarde, the head of the IMF, publicly announced that she is recommending the Chinese yuan to be put in the SDR basket immediately. This is what? August, September, October, 2.5 months.
So, wait, just so I understand. So, when you say that basket, that's when, because I'm still unclear a little on this, when countries go to borrow money from the IMF, they give them a bunch of different currencies.
Yes.
What are the currencies that they're giving right now?
The dollar, the yen, the pound, and the euro.
And the yen being the Chinese?
Japanese.
Oh, okay.
The yuan is the Chinese. So the RMB.
Okay, but now it's going to be the yuan. So what was the other one? You said the dollar, which is U.S.
The dollar, the British
Japan,
pound, the
Britain.
British pound, and the euro.
Okay, and now it's going to be in China's currency as well.
Yep. And
how do they do it percentage-wise? Do they just split it up equally?
It depends. Different locations in the world have more affinity to different currencies. I mean, everybody's going to get a basket.
Because that's kind of weird. Like, so if they would have gave the Ukraine money, how would they have broken that up?
It would have been primarily euros and dollars, maybe some British pounds. But Greece Greece owes, the whole Greece fiasco was money owed to the European Central Bank, the ECB, and
Right.
the IMF. So Greece isn't going to be interested in yen, but they're going to be interested in dollars and euros. So, and the money that is lent out is funded by these countries. These countries give this money to the IMF to function as this purposes.
Well, I look at the IMF as like the mafia. I don't know if I'm sure you've seen Goodfellas. Don't tell me you haven't seen Goodfellas.
Yeah, but the IMF
But
serves the purpose because some countries cannot make direct loans to other countries, so they use a middleman, and that's what the IMF is. The IMF is supposed to be autonomous from political control.
Yeah, but they're not.
The U.S. controls the IMF, just like the U.S. controls the World Bank.
Well,
SWIFT. It's the dollar. The dollar's the reserve currency.
But that's what I'm saying. That just like so, the scene in the well, it's more than one scene, but where Paulie took over the restaurant,
right?
And so they whatever
and
bought all this shit.
The restaurant, they just sold everything off
and then
took the insurance.
Exactly, and then what happened at the end? Yeah, I mean they just lit it up. But what I'm saying is they took power over, a certain power over the restaurant. I'm not talking about the lighting it on fire or whatever. So what I'm saying is just the same thing that I said about what Rockefeller did is he realized that he didn't just get the benefit of making these loans and making interest payments on these loans. He knew he was getting also the benefit of influence within these countries.
What's the Rothschild mantra? Allow me to print a nation's money, and I care not who makes its laws.
Right. So what I'm saying is the IMF is pretty much, from what it seems like to me, obviously you know better, but what it seems like is that it's that same model of Rockefeller, that's what it does, and we know that anyway because that's what it was going to do with the Ukraine.
Yeah, well, exactly.
So,
but the Ukraine was a little bit more. The Ukraine was a coup takeover to one, steal its gold, which the U.S. did in the cover of night. I wrote an article on that like a few days after the takeover. But the other thing is Ukraine is a border state to Russia, and the U.S. wanted to be able to put NATO bases and missiles right there on the border of Russia.
Yeah, and obviously that's not going to happen.
Ukraine has more of a geopolitical than just what the IMF is doing. The IMF, I'll give you the biggest example. IMF in Greece. Okay, Greece had a number of sovereign bonds that they owed money to, like $170 billion. The IMF and the ECB loaned the money to Greece. Now, did Greece be able to do that to try to build their economy? No. Instantly, they borrowed the money from the IMF and ECB and paid back Goldman Sachs these bonds. So Goldman Sachs got paid off instead of a default, and Greece was still stuck with $170 billion owed to IMF and ECB. Their economy isn't going to change because they had no capital coming in to build their economy, and the IMF instituted that they had to do austerity, like cutting pensions, cutting salaries for public workers, a whole bunch of other stuff. And they dealt with that for 5 years before Tsipras and the Syriza party came in, tried to negotiate, but Germany, who pretty much controls the ECB, wouldn't negotiate, and now they're back into much more austerity.
We got about 6 or 7 minutes left. So do you want to kind of summarize what's going on with...
When I was talking about the nexus of things changing, is we are looking at the West trying to overtake the Middle East and trying with TPP to stave off the growing trade pacts that are coming out of China.
Well, not just TPP. There's another one too, right?
Yes,
with
TPIP.
Europe.
TPIP in Europe, but that's not going to. I don't think that's.
But is the TPP, because the way I look at it, and I read some of what got leaked a couple years ago. I don't know how much it's changed, but it was some crazy shit with the copyrights and patents. And basically you could get sued over, like I could get sued over broadcasting this show if I play a clip that I'm not supposed to play or something.
Bingo.
I mean, so
patents will cross international borders.
So, yeah, right. So
the same way
if
the European Union sued Microsoft, because Microsoft supposedly was a monopoly and the European Union's own tech companies couldn't, the tech companies couldn't actually make a good operating system, so they were stuck with Microsoft Windows. So they sued Microsoft for not giving their code out for free. The same thing's going to happen here, but on a grander scale. So
is this to you the start of world government? Because to me it seems like it's not the start,
it's just another component. But the point I'm saying is there are two factions fighting right now. Okay, the West is trying to hold on, but the dollar is virtually close to collapsing. The U.S. government is insolvent. They owe more debt than the GDP. They're at 102% of GDP.
Are they going to provoke?
That's bankrupt.
Are they going to provoke World War III out of it? Because basically,
they're trying to do that
it's kind of leading to that right now, where there's a proxy. Essentially, if you look at it, there's a proxy war against Russia because ISIS is fighting Russia. ISIS is essentially the U.S. government. It might as well be. So in a way, it's And in your opinion, I mean, do all these other countries know that that ISIS is basically the U.S.'s army to do whatever they need done?
But the problem is that the European banks are lashed to the Federal Reserve, and the dollar and SWIFT. The sanctions that were put on Russia and the sanctions that were put on Iran, so that they could not use the SWIFT system and use the dollar for trade. European leaders know that the U.S. could do that same thing to them and instantly crash their economy. So they stay with the United States out of fear of instantaneous collapse, revolution, revolt, the whole 9 yards.
Because if you look at it, if you're these other countries, if you get powerful enough, if you're talking about Russia and China, and they're able to, and I don't know about, definitely China still being, a communist country and the way they treat their people, and
they're politically communist, and they are economically capitalist.
So yeah, but I mean, as far as how they treat their people, I don't know enough about that, but what I'm saying is, if you're all these other countries and you look at what the U.S. is doing, if all these other countries got together, they could say, well, they start a war with the U.S. for what they're doing. I mean,
they could, but all the leaders are bought and paid for. They're in there. They're puppets. Every single one is a puppet.
What happens when the dollar isn't worth anything? I mean, what are you going to pay them with?
Well, then there's going to be. They don't care. They want chaos. Remember, this is the thing. There's no end. The only end game they have is to come in as the savior to institute world government. They don't care about the interim.
They do that with everything. They always want to be the savior of the problems that they cause. They cause the problems, and they come in and save the day.
Bingo. And so to do that, they need to create chaos to destroy the concept of individual nationalism. Now, you were saying that we shouldn't have borders. That's what the world government wants. Okay, but the problem
I also don't believe there should be governments neither. So
yeah, but as Mao says, power comes from the point of a gun. We can wish that we could have autonomous libertarianism all around the world, but the heart of man is evil. The heart of man is wicked. There are always people who want to assume control over everybody else. And if they have enough money and they have enough guns, they will always get away with doing it. Because the vast majority of people are sheep. When we had our revolution in 1776, only 3% of the colonists actually wanted to separate. 97% of the colonists were more content to live under Britain rule and
yeah,
pays
but
the taxes.
the
3%.